Inner Quest explores various pathways through which you can connect with the infinite wisdom of the universe and apply it to personal, professional, and spiritual growth. This program, featuring accomplished practitioners, educators, and authors, is provided by Infinity Foundation, an innovative center for holistic studies and research. We invite you to share this journey with us.
Hello, welcome to Inner Quest. My name is Jay Stone, your host for today, and our guest is Robert Ohotto. Did I pronounce your last name?
You did.
Welcome, Robert.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
And I'm very happy to have you as a guest. I was unfamiliar with your work until I started to do some research. You've done some phenomenal stuff. Robert is a renowned writer, teacher, professional, intuitive, consultant, and astrologer. Robert has taught at the Carolyn Mace Institute. Robert wrote a book called Transforming Fate into Destiny. He hosts his own radio show for Hay House, and he's an upcoming TV show personality. Let me ask you, what kind of TV show are you going to have?
I was actually cast on a TV show a year ago out of LA, but it's still kind of being hung up in some developmental issues. So
well,
we're going to see what happens with that. But there's been a few other things that have come up on the radar as well over the past couple of years.
Well, I hope you can throw this interview in your press kit.
You bet.
Let me just hold up your book to our audience, Transforming Fate into Destiny. What does the title mean?
Well, it's based on the sort of premise of what I've distilled from the work I've done over the years. I work primarily as an intuitive astrologer, which is basically I do readings on people going into their psyche and tracking the agreement their soul has made with fulfilling their purpose in this lifetime. So there's a sense that we each have a fate, that we've agreed to something in this life that is something that oftentimes cannot be transformed. So for example, we have the bodies we have, we age, there's certain aspects of the human journey that are limits that we need to set a trajectory of purpose for ourselves. But there's also this area of where we co-create our destiny, where we get to decide through consciousness and in our empowerment who we're going to be in the world and how we're going to live our lives in the world. So what I wanted to do is define that for people, like where are we limited, where we need to accept those limits and use them as guidance toward a certain goal per the soul, and where are we unlimited and where can we use empowerment and conscious choice to direct our destiny forward and co-create the highest potential of our lives.
Well, let's see if I understand you. So fate is like something that's going to happen, and destiny is what we would like to happen. So you kind of want fate and destiny to kind of become one.
Yeah, they really are two sides of one coin, and so one way of saying it too is that fate is the hand you're dealt by life, right? And then destiny is how you play it out. So it's how you consciously use what you've been given through what the soul has already agreed to experience or use as a vessel of consciousness in this life, and then how do you use that consciously once you're here by awakening to the soul.
Now, you call yourself an intuitive astrologer.
Right.
How is that different from a regular astrologer?
The best way I can language that would be a regular astrologer can take a birth chart, which is a chart that's erected by the exact time and place of one's birth, and then you look at this fixture of where the planets aligned, and it basically is a blueprint for the person whose birth chart it is, of their soul plan, of their life's purpose. But that could also be the chart of, if we got a 5-year-old child, it could be the chart of a dog. They could have been born at the same time and place, relatively speaking. So what determines an intuitive astrologer, from my point of view, is what I'm able to do versus a normal astrologer is I'm actually able to connect intuitively to the consciousness behind that chart. And the way that I could also language this is that if you've got the chart of two twins, basically born around the same time, what I've discovered is that there's two different souls working with that same blueprint, and what does that mean? How is their consciousness going to engage with that blueprint to live a life of a destined life, a life of destiny? How do they transform fate into destiny? So what I do differently from astrologers, not only do I chart the energy of cycles, which is what astrology really is about, which I would like to explain a little bit more about.
You could explain now if you want.
Okay, well, most people think of astrology just in terms of going through a bunch of character traits and this is your personality. And I'd like to really strip that out and say that what it really is actually is it's about understanding the archetypal, the patterned nature of consciousness as it exists in this time-space dimension that we call Earth, and how we are fused into this matrix of consciousness through our soul to co-create within that those rhythms, those cycles. So everybody's living actually an astrological life. They just don't know it because we all follow a calendar. We've all derived the calendar from solar movement around and the planetary cycles and how we move around the sun. And so,
not to mention 100 cycles inside our body.
No kidding, right?
Yeah.
So all astrology really is a more refined way of looking at the energy of cycles that was laid down by the ancients, and their projecting of their interiors onto the stars. So what they were doing, what they believed were gods and goddesses out there in the sky and constellations and projecting these mythologies and these ideas, was they were mapping out our inner creative processes and the fundamental human experience of creation in this particular location of the universe, where we have, you know, energy transforming into matter, and how does it happen through cycles of time, and basically what astrology then becomes in the sun sign, so which is determined by when you were born during the year, and it's determined by the seasons. So, for example, if you're born August 15th, that means your sun is in Leo. That is not an innate quality of personality traits. It's actually definitive of a core pattern that the consciousness of somebody has decided to work with as part of a purpose.
But if somebody's born August 15th, there's also the mother. You know, you'd have to look at her chart, wouldn't you, and the father, because it's a combination of your parents' cycles as well.
Well, it's yes, because we do inherit through our parents what I call psychic DNA. You actually inherit patterning that's ancestral and generational in momentum. But at the same time, the coordinating function of the sun is to bring all that to some sort of new individuation process through the pattern of Leo. So
now,
for that Leo
in your
person.
book, and by the way, Carolyn Mace,
She did the foreword for me.
Yeah, and I'm pronouncing her name. Mace?
Carolyn Mace, right?
Yeah, she wrote the foreword. Now, does your book talk about astrology? Because it's subtitled "A New Dialogue with Your Soul."
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, it does not, because it more takes on the intuitive aspect because it's more accessible to people. I mean, I should really, frankly, have a PhD with all I know in terms of astrology. It's a lot about understanding archetypes and cycles and different sorts of angular relationships between planets in the sky. And so what I wanted to do was create something that everyone could get something out of based on what I know through this work.
I don't think you can get anything more out of life than what you're claiming here. I mean, if somebody transforms their fate into their destiny, what more is there?
Well, it's one way of looking at it, because I think it's all about coaching people to ask questions. I think it's always about, well, let's ask another question. You know, let this question lead to the next question, and that's the whole journey in the mystery of consciousness.
Well, you seem to be very bright. When did you realize you had a gift or an interest in astrology and the archetypal world and mythology?
Well, my intuitive senses were kind of there when I was a kid, and my parents, I remember enrolling me in a martial arts course and in Taekwondo, and that's where I first learned how to meditate and became more in tune with that part of myself. I remember giving adults relationship advice when I was like 12 years old at tournaments, and they'd all start to ask me about what they think that I should do, and I always had wise things to say, and I don't know where that, just innately came out of me.
Do you get into reincarnation in your life?
I absolutely believe in reincarnation, yeah, absolutely.
And do you feel like where you're at today is a result of some of your preceding lives?
I would assume so, yeah. But I'm not very earthbound with reincarnation either. I think we reincarnate in many dimensions and planets, and who knows what galaxies we've been to. I'm not just Earth-centric or focused there, but in my perspective. But then that led to in college, my freshman year. I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic high school, Catholic grade school. I'm very,
Did you grow up in the Chicago area?
No, I grew up actually in Colorado and Wisconsin. So then I went off to college, where your mind gets to open, and I met one of my frat brothers when I was a freshman that knew how to read tarot cards. So he asked me that summer after my freshman year if I wanted a tarot card reading, and I'm like, yeah, bring it on. I want to know what this is. And I was very open to that, and I was actually very amazed at his insight into me. It wasn't about telling the future, but insight into my personal psychology and my patterning, and that got me hooked, and he taught me the rest of that summer the tarot, which is based on the Kabbalah. And so I learned the Kabbalah.
Did you study communications in college by any chance?
Well, I was a linguist. So